بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, my dear respected viewers, those who are attending the Aqidah Sanusiyyah, we begin our lesson today by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue, and we pray that Allah make in this lesson a blessed one, a lesson where our sins are forgiven, our prayers are answered, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with iman and taqwa, and bless us with the understanding of deen, and may Allah bless us with husnul khatima, ameen, ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah ta'ala, before we enter our lesson today, let us do a bit of revision of what we have mentioned in our previous class. In our previous class, we were speaking about the proof for qiyamuhu bi nafsihi, on sifat salbiyah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-dependent. And there are two meanings to this. Number one, that he is not in need of a locus to subsist in, لا يحتاج إلى المحل. And number two, لا يحتاج إلى المخصص. So number one, he is not in need of a locus to subsist in. And we mentioned that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of a locus, of a place, or a thing that he subsists in, then he must be an attribute, a sifa. And a sifa does not subsist in a sifa. A sifa does not subsist in a sifa. This is what we mentioned. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a sifa. Allah is an entity, a that. And laysa kamislihi shay, there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is not in need of a place to reside. No, na'udhu billah min zalik, he subsists in something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of a locus, or not in need of a place or space. And this is different from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the characteristics is that we are in need of a place to reside, or we take up space. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the same as the makhluk. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, laysa kamislihi shay'un wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. There is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything that is ascribed to the makhluk, we have to negate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very important principle in the aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And this is based on clear verses in the Quran. This is amongst the muhkamat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Ikhlas, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is why we negate everything that is within the makhluk, that it is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason why we say that if we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subsists in something, then he must be a sifa, and Allah is not a sifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he is a sifa, then he cannot be ascribed with sifat al-ma'ani, because sifat does not subsist in sifat. A sifat subsists in an entity, that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has the sifat al-ma'ani, so he cannot be a sifa, and at the same time he has sifat al-ma'ani that subsists in the sifa. And the author mentioned what is the reason that it is not permissible. So maybe we take a look again at the text. This basically anywhere we are in our last lesson. And inshallah ta'ala today we go into wahdaniyah. Uh, before that, and he mentioned the understanding of the qualitative. Before that, this is basically what I mentioned earlier. Self-subsistence and it means that the divine entity is free of needing any locus or determiner. So there's two things. And number one, is the mahal, and number two is mukhassis. Mahal is the locus, and then we have the mukhassis, and he is the one who brought him into existence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of something else to specify his existence, and this is impossible for Allah. That is easy to understand. It is an intrinsic and self-sufficiency and freedom from needing a locus or determiner for Allah's entity. Self-subsistence is therefore composed of two portions: freedom from needing any locus and freedom from needing a determiner. The rational proof for the first portion is as follows: if he, the exalted, were in need any of a locus, that is to say, if he were in need any of an entity in which to subsist, just as an attribute subsists within one described with it, he will be an attribute. This is what I mentioned earlier. If you were to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is need of something else to subsist, then he must be an attribute. But Allah is not an attribute. If he is an attribute, then he cannot possess sifat ma'ani. But Allah what you got has is ascribed with sifat and ma'ani. If you were in need any of an entity in which to subsist, such as an attribute subsists within the one described with it, he would then be an attribute of something else, which is a meaning among qualitative any meanings. Nothing but an attribute needs any locus. An entity does not need any locus in which to subsist. If it were possible for an entity to subsist within another entity, as what we mentioned, that it is not possible for an attribute to subsist in an attribute, to enter into an attribute, sifa to subsist sifa. Likewise, it is not possible for an entity to subsist within an entity. It is not possible for something which is that to subsist in that. It is impossible. If it were possible for an entity to subsist within another entity, that would entail that latter entity also subsists within an entity. So this will goes back into infinite regression. If you were to say that every entity subsists within one another, then it will be never ending. It will be never ending. And all entities subsist within one another, and this is impossible. This is because receptivity is a quality of every entity. And in the moment you say that one particular entity has the capacity to subsist in another entity, then this will mean that all entities will have the same characteristic. An attribute is not described with qualitative or predicative attributes, because if an attribute was receptive to having another attribute subsist with it, the other attribute will be receptive to the same. So qualitative attributes do not subsist in qualitative attributes. What is the meaning of qualitative attributes? In Arabic we call it, in Tawhid we call it sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat al-ma'ani is sifat wujudiyah. It is something that is in existence. An attribute which is in existence, different from sifat salbiyah, because sifat salbiyah is not in existence. I mentioned many a times, and maybe I repeat this so that it will be clear, inshallah ta'ala. There is a reason why I repeat all this, because for the fact that for 2 weeks we don't have class, then sometimes these things might be difficult for some. When we say sifat salbiyah is not in existence, and what is the meaning? Again, it means when you say sifat salbiyah, for example, sifat al-qidam, example, al-qidam al-baqa. Al-qidam, Allah has no beginning. We are negating beginningness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are saying that beginningness is not in existence. This is what we meant when we say sifat salbiyah is non-existence, because we are negating the impossibilities for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So salbiyah meaning to negate any something. So it is not in existence. But it is different from sifat ma'ani. Sifat ma'ani is in existence and it subsists within the entity. So here the author is saying that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will subsist into something, then he must be a sifa, which is ma'na min al-ma'ani. Ma'na min al-ma'ani. And it not salbiyah, not any sifat salbiyah, because sifat salbiyah is not in existence. So here he is speaking about the qualitative attributes, and also sifat ma'nawiyah, ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. So this is impossible any for them any to subsist a qualitative attribute to subsist in a qualitative attribute. Because if that is the case, as what we mentioned, that it will lead any to infinite regression. That means that all qualitative any attributes can subsist in other attributes, and this is any impossible. This any will lead any to all attributes any subsisting any within one another, and it is impossible. This is what any he mentioned. If an attribute was receptive to having any attribute subsist with it, he is speaking about qualitative attributes. Then other attribute will be receptive to the same, thus necessitating an infinite regress, as what I mentioned, and an ending in a series of existing things and with an end. So this is basically any our revision. And then after that, we spoke about the qualitative attributes and predicative attributes. So in Arabic, we call it the ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. Ma'ani is mentioned as qualitative, ma'nawiyah is predicative attributes. Now the author Sheikh Said Fuda, he explained further to speaking about the difference between salbiyah, and we have another attribute that is nafsiyah, for example, and then ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. What are the differences, and what are the type of attributes that we are referring in this particular topic? So he said the understanding of the qualitative and predicative attributes is that they are described if essential or negating attributes. So now he's saying that a qualitative attribute. Let me give an example. I gave this example also in our last lesson. An example of sifat ma'ani or sifat ma'na. Knowledge is an example of a qualitative attribute. It is an example of a qualitative attribute. It subsists within an entity. It does not stand on its own. This is the nature of qualitative attributes. It is existent, but it subsists within an entity. طيب, can a qualitative attribute be ascribed to sifat salbiyah and sifat nafsiyah? The answer is yes. This is what the author is saying. طيب, how you ascribe sifat ma'ani to sifat salbiyah? Sifat salbiyah, the definition is an attribute that negates. It is something that negates. It is an expression that negates something that is not within its definition. So, for example, we say the attribute of knowledge. So now what can we negate when we speak about the attribute of knowledge? So we say that it is not ignorance. Knowledge is not ignorance. This is an example of salbiyah. To negate something that is not within its definition. So the meaning of salbiyah, let me make this clear. The meaning of salbiyah is basically to negate something that is not within its definition. So for example, let us give an example of human beings. For example, if you see for example someone who is hearing, you say that this particular person is not deaf. This is an example of salbiyah. A person hears. So what does it mean? It means that he is not deaf. A person is blind. A person is is able have the ability to see. We say that he is not blind. So this is an example of sifat salbiyah. You are negating something that is not within the definition of the qualitative attributes. Now, so that is why we say that qualitative attributes can be ascribed with sifat salbiyah, and also nafsiyah. Nafsiyah is basically speaks about existence, that this particular attribute is in existence. For example, if you possess any knowledge, the knowledge exists in you. It is nafsiyah. When you possess any knowledge, we say that is not any ignorance. Knowledge is not ignorance. This is any salbiyah. So these are so many of the examples. So now the author is saying that they are described with essential or negating attributes. Essential meaning goes back to nafsiyah, or negating any attributes in salbiyah. Such as saying, for example, now he gives an example. Allah's knowledge exists. This is nafsiyah. So the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in existence. This existence is an essential attribute, as all other qualitative attributes. All other qualitative attributes, they are wujudiyah. They are in existence. That's what we mentioned. Different from sifat salbiyah, they are not in existence. So the existence of every attribute is essential. Nafsiyah. In describing the negating attribute, we said Allah's omnipotence is pre-eternal and endless. For example, we say Allah possesses Qudra, and Allah is Qadir. And this Qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. Now this is Sifat Salbiyah. We are ascribing any Salbiyah to the Qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say Allah's power has no beginning. Allah's power has no ending. Now, the power of Allah is Qadim. The power of Allah is Baqi. So this is an example of ascribing Sifat Salbiyah to Sifat Ma'ani. Allah's omnipotence is pre-eternal and Qadim and endless, Baqi, and so on. Allah's omnipotence is not the same as other. The power of Allah is not the same as other power. Now, this is what you call it Sifat Salbiyah, from Salbiyah. The same is said regarding Allah's knowledge and other qualitative attributes. Likewise, when we speak about the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say the kalam of Allah laysat biharfin wala sawt. We say the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, has no beginning. The kalam of Allah has no ending. The kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the same as other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. So this is an example of Salbiyah. At the same time also we must understand, when we speak about Salbiyah, we are speaking about the definition in the Arabic language. When we say Salbiyah, again, is about negating something that is not within its definition. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to focus on the five Salbiyah of all the qualitative attributes. It is not the case. The meaning of Salbiyah, when we say that the qualitative attributes is ascribed by Sifat Salbiyah, is that you can ascribe Sifat Salbiyah to the qualitative, and it doesn't mean that it goes back to the five Salbiyah which we ascribe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here the meaning of Salbiyah is a general meaning, because last week somebody asked 2 weeks ago somebody asked the question that if we follow the five attributes of Salbiyah, that when we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we apply it to Sifat al-Ma'ani, one of it is Qiyamuhu bin Nafs, and we are saying that Qiyamuhu bin Nafs meaning not in need of a locus. So here we are specifically speaking about the attributes of Allah. But when we speak about general meaning of qualitative attributes, we say that it can be ascribed by Sifat Salbiyah. It can be ascribed by Sifat Salbiyah, and the meaning here is general, not necessarily we are speaking about the five Salbiyah which we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that, he mentioned the attributes are only conjugating attributes because in of themselves they are non-existent and without an external reality. This is what I mentioned earlier. They are not in existence. This is Sifat Salbiyah. As for qualitative attributes, I just scroll this down. As for qualitative attributes, they are existent, and the predicative attributes are inseparable for them. When we say qualitative attributes, they are wujudiyah, so we mentioned they are in existence, and the predicative attributes is a result of the qualitative attributes. It is an extraction of the qualitative attributes. So from Qudra we have Qadir, from Kalam we have Mutakallim, from Haya we have Al-Hayy, and so on and so forth. So anything that we speak about qualitative applies to predicative, because they are inseparable. They are inseparable. All this we mentioned last time. It is proven both rationally and textually that Allah is ascribed with qualitative, medicative attributes. That means He's not an attribute. This is basically what the author is speaking about. That Allah is what you call it, not an attribute. Allah is not an attribute. Allah is an entity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has any attribute. So He is an entity, not what you call it, only an attribute. Rather, He is an entity that does not resemble attributes. Hence, He does not need a locus. The rational proof for the second portion is that He is free from needing a determiner is as follows. If He was in need of a determiner, the meaning of determiner in Arabic, we call it mukhassis, the one who specifies. So we say that it means a person who specifies for example the existence, or specifies the place, or specifies the time. Here we are speaking about something else that bring him into existence, and this is impossible. If he was in need of a determinate and subject doer, he would be contingent. Yani if Allah is created, yani is brought into existence, then he has a beginning. If he has a beginning, then he is a creation and he not a creator. And he cannot any be na'udzubillah min dhalik, and he cannot be God. All this any we mentioned in when we speak any about the proofs any of the al-qidam, the pre-eternality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All this any we mentioned already. Based on the aforementioned rational and unequivocal proofs that he is not any contingent, this is proven false. That Allah yani is not contingent, so it is impossible any that he is in need of a mukhassis, yani to what you call it, bring him any into existence, and it is impossible. So this is basically the revision for our lesson 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Today's lesson yani will be the next. This is going yani to be our today's any lesson, and today yani I will not any take any much time. Just I need to give you some maybe some summary or some ideas any about the rational proof of the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the translator any mentioned here the rational proof for Allah's any oneness. So here we are still any within any sifat salbiyah. So sifat salbiyah yani we have 5, al-qidam wal-baqa, mukhalafatul hawadis, qiyamuhu bi nafsihi. Now any we are on the 5th one, wahdaniyah. Wahdaniyah ini meaning any the oneness any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taib, wahdaniyah yani has 2 meanings. Number 1, we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in number. Number 2, we say Allah is one in essence, and he is not compounded. He is not any made up of parts. This is the meaning of wahdaniyah. And this is also the meaning of the word ahad. That's what Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Ikhlas. Qul huwallahu ahad. Yani say that Allah is ahad. There is a difference between ahad and wahid. Wahid and is one in number. Ahad and is one in number and one in essence. Ahad and is one in number and one is essence. Not only we say Allah is wahid, we say Allah is ahad. So the meaning in ahadiyah is the same as wahdaniyah. There are various categories of divine oneness. The oneness any in divinity, in uluhiyah. The meaning any of oneness and in uluhiyah, meaning he is one. He is one. There is any no other than him. No other than him. Yani he is any the only God. The one any and the one any and only. This is the meaning any when we say what when the author any mentioned Tawheedul Uluhiyah, not any the Tawheed and Uluhiyah of the Wahhabi. Tawheed and Uluhiyah any of the Wahhabis, any follow any Ibn Taymiyyah, who mentioned any that Tawheed any is divided into 3 parts. That their definition any is different. This is not any the Tawheed and Uluhiyah any that is mentioned by what any the author any meant. Here what the author meant and basically to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is the one God, the one yani divine, the divine yani entity, the one any divine God. This is the meaning of Tawheedul Uluhiyah, because any the word any Uluhiyah comes any from ilah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, wa ilahukum ilahun wahid, yani your ilah, yani your God, and it is one. This is the meaning any of Tawheed Uluhiyah, and there is no difference any between ilah and Rabb. There is no difference. Yani Allah yani is ilah in the Quran, any at times any Allah mentioned wa ilahukum ilahun wahid, that your Lord any is one Lord, and at times any in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascribe any himself any to Rabbul Alameen, yani he is any the Rabb, yani the one God who owns any every of his creation. So there is no difference any between ilah and Rabb, and in a sense that we say Allah yani is ilah and Allah yani is Rabb. There is no difference in the meaning any of ilah and Rabb. And from this linguistic any meaning of ilah and Rabb, any comes any the word any uluhiyah any from ilah and rububiyyah any from Rabb. But the tawhid any of yani what people call any as the movement any of the Salafiyah or the Wahhabiyah, they basically any follow any Ibn Taymiyyah any, who is the first any to divide Tawheed any into 3 parts by saying any Tawheed any uluhiyah, Tawheed any rububiyyah, and mentioning any that the those any who worship any the idols, they what you call it, they believe any in Tawheed any rububiyyah, but they do not believe in Tawheed any uluhiyah, and so on and so forth. All this any is basically what you call it falsehood, and rebutting it, and it is a lot of our ulama ini by the grace of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala rebutted any this ideology. And this is any one of the ideologies any which is dangerous any, especially nowadays, and you find that takfir any is being done based any on this separation any of tawhid any into the three parts. Ala kulli hal, I wrote an article, I think 3 years ago any on this, on what you call it, I translated a part any of the fatwa of Sheikh Ali Jum'ah on this, and basically any a lot of scholars any mentioned about this. So just I need to take note for those any who are reading any this kitab. Do not any be confused, do not be confused, because nowadays any this kind of things any has to be explained, and because people are in, a lot of people any are in any confusion. Yani how does any takfir any occurs any by this segregating any this tawhid any into three parts? Yani by them any saying any, for example, that those any who do tawassul, they believe in the rububiyyah, but does not any believe any in the uluhiyyah. So they are the same any as the idol any worshippers, who say that Allah yani is their Lord, but at the same time any they worship any the idols. So that is why the idea yani of takfir any occurs in this ummah. Yani a lot any of people are subjected any to takfir any because any of this ideology. And the moment yani you do takfir any to a person, that person is murtad, and murtad is halalud dam. And this is any one of the things and it is happening in akhir zaman, that you find any Muslims any killing another Muslim by the claim any that Muslim any has apostate. And this is what is happening. And in reality we see this and with our own eyes, and what we see is happening in Syria, what we see is happening in Iraq, on the idea any of ISIS and killing Muslims and so on and so forth. So it is something and it is important. And if you are learning any tawhid, then you should find out, read up about the history any of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, history any of Ibn Taymiyyah any, for example, and how any those any who came any after him followed any this ideology any until today, and how any it result any to killing, how it result any to bombing and so on in the end, and so forth. And it basically any result any to a lot any of terrorist any acts which gives any Islam any a bad name. So all this any traces any to the creed and in reality, yani the understanding any of their form any of tawhid. Ala kulli hal. So now when we go back into the kitab, and the author any mentioned, of course any what I mentioned any earlier, of course this is any not really any the topic any of discussion. The only thing I want to say that, because any of the word any uluhiyyah, I feel something any has to be explained, so that some of you any might not be thinking any something else, but to speak any about the subject, and it requires any some time, requires any at least any 45 minutes and to speak any about what is meant any by their version and so on and so forth. The oneness any in action. So we have now yani author is saying tawhid uluhiyyah, tawhidus sifat. What is the meaning tawhid uluhiyyah? Any meaning Allah is one, yani ilahun wahid. This is the meaning of tawhid uluhiyyah. Tawhidul af'al, and meaning the action any of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala any is one. Yani the action any of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, everything any comes any from Allah. And Allah any is one any who created any everything. And then we have the oneness any attributes, none other than Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala possess any the attributes of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And then oneness any in entity, that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala yani is one any in number and one in essence. Oneness in divinity points into the fact that Allah is the only one God. Now this basically what is the meaning, the meaning of wahdaniyah. In other words, He is the only one uniquely described with divinity, based on the fact that every contingently possible thing is in need of Him. Everything else other than Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is in need of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Allah is not in need of anything. He is the one who brought everything into existence, and He is not in need of anything, whereas everything other than Him is in need of Him. Oneness in actions, and He points to the fact that Allah is the only doer. Everything that happens, it happens by Allah. This is the meaning of Tawheedul Af'al. Everything happens by Allah. Everything that happens, good and bad, everything happens by the action of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. This is the meaning of Tawheedul Af'al. So here the author is basically explaining any further. Oneness any actions any points any to the fact Allah is the only doer. In other words, Allah is the only creator. No, none other can create any to bring something from non-existence any to existence. Oneness any attributes any point any to the fact that He is the only one who is eternally living and self-subsistent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who is wajibul wujud. Wajibul any wujud. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has any the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is any the only one who is eternal, because any of the attributes any of Allah is eternal, qadim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is qadim. So tawhidul sifat, none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possess any the attributes of Allah. Other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are all contingent, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pre-eternal and eternal. Oneness in entity points to the fact that Allah is a truly existent. Now, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani is created, yani makhluk. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is the only one who is wajibul wujud, yani his existence and he has no beginning and no ending, and other than him comes any from him. And then the author and he mentioned the rational proof any for Allah's any oneness, and he says follows: if he were not one in his entity or attributes or actions, then nothing of the universe, be it substances or accidents, would have existed, because he would have been incapable. So basically what the author and he is saying, now the author and he is speaking any about what is any the proof of the oneness any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is any the proof any of the oneness any of Allah? So the author and he is saying in the beginning, and he says that if Allah any is not one, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not one, nothing in this universe can exist. I repeat, if Allah any is not one, if God any is not one in his entity, attributes and actions, then nothing any in this universe, he said, be it substances any or accidents, would have existed, because he would have been incapable. And this is basically what Allah mentioned in the Quran, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَا. If there is other gods than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be chaos and destruction, yani in the heavens and in the earth. Why is that so? This is the proof that the author will speak about. So he said, further clarifying. So now he make the statement, now he speak about evidence. So you have any statement. What is the statement? The statement is that if God is not one, the universe cannot exist. If God is not one, the universe cannot exist. This is a statement. What is the evidence? The evidence is coming. So he said that further clarifying this, we say that if there was something similar to him in divinity, it would necessitate that both he and that thing are incapable, whether they are in cooperation or non-cooperation, or had apportioned the act of creation between them. Each of these categories must either be by choice or by compulsion. So now the author is saying, if there is something similar to him in divinity. So now the example will be that there are two gods. Yani, just for the sake of trying to understand this evidence that the author is putting forth. Yani, as though he is saying, imagine that there are other gods other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning there are two gods, for example. Yani God is not one, there are two. So now there are a few possibilities. Yani when comes into creation, either they agree to create something, or they differ to create something, or they work with one another to create that particular thing. So these are the three possibilities, and each of these possibilities, either they are false or they are not false. So this is going to be the evidence behind the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala, we will speak about this in our lesson next week, inshallah. And the reason is because time is limited, and if I speak about this evidence now, I will not be able to cover the whole thing. I think it is better for me once I start to speak about in Aqidah we call it the Burhanu Tamanu. Burhanu Tamanu. And this is based in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about subhanallah about the evidence of his oneness in the Quran. So when you are speaking to people and people ask you what is the evidence that God is one, you say God must be one, and God cannot be many. What is the evidence? The evidence is this Burhanu Tamanu. Yani the three things as what we mentioned, which inshallah ta'ala we will cover in our next lesson. So inshallah in our next lesson we can complete the evidence of of wahdaniyah in one shot. So inshallah it will be easier for people to understand. Inshallah I will stop my lesson here, and we'll continue in our next lesson. I do not know. Okay, no question I believe. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.